Welcome, Swagatam, Jai Hind. These days, the air is full of the Gen Z revolution. A great deal is being said about the Gen Z young men and women. However, not even 0.01% of India's population, including the urban people, the English educated people, are clear about what this expression really means, what the sociological phenomenon is. Therefore, how really to understand the great drama that's unfolding itself in front of our eyes. The purpose of this video and the next video, that is a series of 2 videos, is to explain to my viewers from a position of historical, sociological, psychological, even philosophical and political outlook, how we are to understand this phenomenon. Because the more we understand, the more we intellectually enjoy the events that happen in front of us. Otherwise, we witness certain things and feel overwhelmed by them. It is necessary to get an intellectual grip on what's happening, and therefore, through these 2 videos, I seek to offer to you somewhat academic, but more than academic perspective on what's happening in our times, the contemporary situation. Now, I do this in 2 parts. In the first part, I try to introduce to you the overall context in which the Gen Z in India exists. And I consider that to be extremely important to understand the significance of this event. In the second part, I'll try to introduce you to the various characteristic features of this Gen Z. They are a very distinct category, and we need to understand that in its factual details. So these are the 2 parts. Now, without any further explanation, let me enter the first part, because time is at a premium. So let's really develop an idea of the general context. In order to do that, since we are dealing with young people, let me begin with a story with which all of us are familiar, a story that young people grew up hearing about, or some of them learning. This is the story titled The Emperor's Clothes, written by Christian Andersen. You're familiar with that wonderful collection of stories for children titled Andersen's Tales, and this is a story that you can find in that collection. The title of the story is The Emperor's Clothes. I'm not going to narrate the entire story to you for want of time. You can easily, if you've not read that story, I recommend very strongly that each one of you read that story. It's full of historical, though it looks like children's literature, it's full of very adult insights into history and into human nature. The essence of that story can be sort of reconfigured into 2 parts, or 2 aspects, 2 contrasting aspects, or 2 focal points of awareness. The first is the king and his court. Now, as all of us know, the courtiers, who are parasites on the king, are obliged to swallow whatever the king says. The courtiers have no mind of their own. They merely echo the king. Otherwise, you'll have no place there. It is very much modern, very much a real-life experience, though it happens in the world of a story. So, even if it's an evident falsehood, something that is shockingly untrue, the courtiers are obliged to say, yes, that is the ultimate truth. So, taking advantage of this, 2 clever people come, offering to the king a very special piece of cloth, an invisible piece of cloth with which the emperor can make clothes the like of which no other emperor in the world can have. The emperor obviously gets interested. Now, a counterpart of this could be the idea that India is moving to the very pinnacle of development. That is this invisible cloth sold to the rest of India, which we are obliged to believe. So that is one part, the king, the court, and the myth that is manufactured within this context, that the emperor is now clothed with invisible cloth. Now, the second part is a child who has his own context. The child is not confined or pressurized by the context of the court. The child is remarkably and refreshingly free from the court's false atmosphere and is therefore free to see the obvious truth. The obvious truth is that the king is naked. And therefore, the truth that the Gen Z in India is seeing is that their plight is becoming more and more desperate. The king and the courtiers are saying that your plight is now the best in the world. India is on its way to becoming a superpower. You are the Vishwaguru. But Gen Z, which is not located within the court of the king, is saying, look, our plight is becoming utterly miserable. It's much worse now than it was before. And therefore, they're saying the emperor is naked. And this enables us to see in perspective the confrontation between, very interesting, the mirror image, BJP and CJP. BJP and CJP is extremely interesting. I'm a teacher of literature. Therefore, from my point of view, this is immensely fascinating. I can't think of anything like this ever happening before in Indian history. Here, BJP and CJP are standing face to face with each other as though BJP is standing in front of a mirror. CJP is a mirror image, or says CJP is a mirror that reflects the image of BJP. So the power of propaganda versus the power of truth. BJP, the power of propaganda. CJP, the power of lived truth, truth that they experience from day to day. And the Gen Z in India are shouting out the truth, which now threatens this vast issue of propaganda falsehood that we are in a tremendously promising time, and that it's only a matter of days and months before we hit the top. So as far as the Gen Z in India are saying, well, we don't know much about the king and his courtiers. We certainly know that our condition is desperate, and therefore, from our experience, we have to say, we have to insist that the king, the emperor, is naked. This is exactly the situation. So it would do the emperor some good, actually, to realize that this is indeed the truth. It will do no good to the emperor long term to insist that he is wonderfully clothed when he is actually standing naked before the people. So, therefore, please note this. The Gen Z that we are talking about, unlike the boy in Andersen's Tale, The Emperor's Clothes, is not a 10-year-old child. They're all in their teens and maybe early 20s. So, in Andersen's Tale, the boy shouts. In the context of the Gen Z in India, their characteristic expression is through the medium of satire. Satire. S-A-T-I-R-E. Please note, this is very, very, very important. Their characteristic medium of self-expression is satire. And therefore, quite rightly, quite appropriately, CJP as a nascent national force is born of the power of satire. The womb of which CJP is formed is satire. Cockroach Janata Party is the greatest political satire that I can think of in the Indian context. And on that count alone, I have to take my hats off to Dipke and his gang. So satire is the pinprick that the hand of truth inflicts on the balloon of propaganda and unreality. And that's the reason why those who thrive by propaganda and selling unreality feel immensely threatened by satire. For example, when a great leader says to the country as a whole, the radar cannot penetrate through clouds, and that his very special wisdom enabled the Air Force to carry out a particular operation. Those who are courtiers will applaud that as the ultimate scientific truth. Gen Z will say that's utter nonsense. That's the difference. Or when the Prime Minister says that you can generate or you can gather cooking gas from the drains, and all that you have to do is to connect the drain to a burner, and then you can go on cooking entirely free of cost. The courtiers will applaud that as the ultimate economic discovery. The Gen Z would say that is utter nonsense. The man has lost it. That's what they would say. Or when Modi says that the unemployment problem in India can be solved by young people turning to making samosas. Maybe a little chai also added to that. The unemployment problem in India is solved overnight. That all the youth of India make samosas. The courtiers will applaud that as the ultimate strategy in the economic redemption of India. Gen Z would say the man has lost it. This is the difference. This difference has to be understood. Unfortunately, not many people in this country seem to be doing so. That's the reason why I thought, as a teacher, I'm offering what little I know about this phenomenon. And I have a great deal more to say. And by now you should be clear that this is not a channel where what other people say is repeated. This is a channel through which people seek understanding. A channel which introduces people to the truths of their day-to-day experience. A channel that also makes people aware of the higher possibilities of life. Okay, now because we are now dealing with or trying to understand Gen Zs, let me say something briefly about various generations. Very briefly, I will not waste your time trying to explain everything. If you think of the generation that existed between the First World War and the Second World War, that generation was called the Lost Generation. Why they were called the Lost Generation, I don't have the time to explain, because time will get out of hand. You can find out. The generation that succeeded them was called the Great Generation, because they were associated with great efforts, idealism, etc., etc., great endurance, experiential wisdom. The generation that followed, which is my generation, was called the baby boomers. Baby boomers generation. And the generation that followed mine is called the millennial generation, which ended presumably by 1996, 97, 98, around that period. Of course, dates are arbitrarily fixed. There is no scientific basis on which the date is fixed as 1996 or 97, 98 or whatever. And the generation after the millennial, which begins with, say, 1996 or 97, 98, whatever, till 2022, this generation is called Gen Z. G-E-N-Z, Gen Z. And the generation thereafter will be called Gen Alpha. So there's a sequence. So what I want to therefore tell you is that when we talk about Gen Z, we must understand the profound impact of the time context, the temporal context in which we live and act and think. It's very important. Again, I can only flag this idea and go forward because we don't have the time to look into the details. The real advantage of our Gen Z is that they are outside, like the boy in Andersen's Tale, the emperor's court. Obviously, they are the unemployed youth. They are even outside the system, leave alone the emperor's court. The boy in Anderson's Tale and the Gen Z in India today are both outside the system. So that's a great advantage. So they cannot make themselves, the disadvantage is that they cannot make themselves heard in the court where the king sits. The king's ears are filled with all kinds of stories, propaganda, make-believe. So the Gen Z has no approach. There's no way they can make themselves heard. This is the first time the Gen Z is making its voice heard in the Indian context. From that point of view alone, this is a stupendously important, stupendously significant moment in the history of India. And therefore, because Gen Z cannot make themselves heard in the king's court, they have turned that advantage into that disadvantage into an advantage. They resort to the social media, and particularly the Instagram. Even otherwise, one of the significant features of Gen Z, which I shall explain in the second video, is that they are digital natives. It's a beautiful expression. Please remember this. They are digital natives. What this means, I shall explain in due course. For the time being, just fix this phrase in your mind because it's extremely important. Unlike my generation, unlike the generation that followed me, the millennial generation, the Gen Z are digital natives. And therefore, they will take to the social media like fish to water. And there is no point in grudging them that. That is their native strength, and they will exercise it to the hilt. You try and choke it in any way you can, I tell you, it's bound to fail. Gen Z will not take it. You will expedite a revolution if you try to choke them. I hope the government does not move into that zone of extreme and suicidal folly. So, the point I'm making is that Gen Z turns their disadvantage, namely that their voice cannot be made heard in the courtiers of the king, and in the court of the king, where only the courtiers are heard. They have found their own medium of expression, which is social media, particularly Instagram. And one of the great ironies of modern history is that Modi has been forced to find a small niche in Instagram at midnight. Nothing more needs to be said about this. But not only that, there's something more that we need to realize. Actually, Instagram has no power in itself. There's something called inherent power in itself. Instagram is a social medium. Why should anything digital have any power? Nothing digital has any inherent power. We have to be very clear about these things. Digital media have only derived power, and that power is derived from the powerlessness, the baselessness, the untruth of the myths, particularly the myth that the emperor is wondrously clothed with invisible cloth. Okay? Even though the emperor is wondrously clothed, even though even his private parts are visible to the public. The public is obliged to believe that the emperor is clothed far beyond anybody, even though the public can see even his private parts. So that is the reality that Gen Z will not accept. But the courtiers will accept. My generation of the post-millennial type, even the millennial type, will swallow it. But Gen Z will not swallow it. This is something you have to accept. That's the given of the day, and nobody can change it. Therefore, wisdom demands that this reality is reckoned and everything adjusted to it. So, the message, the truth that Gen Z is shouting out also includes the truth that Modi is not God. You remember Modi claimed that he is not of biological origin? Gen Z would say that's utter nonsense. You need to get your head examined. That's what Gen Z would say. That's not what I'm saying. You can't impress members of Gen Z with this kind of thing. Others might applaud, others might even establish 1,000 temples the moment you say that you are not of biological origin. But those will only invite laughter and derision from the Gen Z of India. This is something that those who are in seats of power must understand this. It will not help them one bit to pretend that this is not real or that the truth is something else. If they do so, they will only do so at their own peril. But this is nothing new. The fact that people respond to the pretensions of power through satire is nothing new. All through history, the pretenses of power have been confronted and debunked with the arrows of satire. The arrows of satire. If you study the history of satirical literature, you will see the truthfulness of what I'm saying. Again, paucity of time will not allow me to present or marshal an entire series of evidence in this context. Wherever power breaks out of its legitimate bounds, you will find the thinking people, the sensitive people of that society responding not through swords and bombs and all that. They respond via satire. They administer the pinprick of truth in the medium of satire. So study the memes and the short films that the young people are making in their thousands. Social media today is flooded with Instagram videos produced by our Gen Z. Tremendous quality, tremendous biting power. The IT cell of the BJP, for all the money and elaborate support that they have, the mammoth size it has, is no match. I dare say, no match for the effervescent creativity of Gen Z as far as the satirical output in social media that they are producing almost upon the instant. Inspiration, sheer inspiration. They are the magnificent examples of what I said a short while ago, are digital natives. Now, there is a further question to be considered if you want to understand the general context in which the Indian Gen Z's exist and struggle. Please, let's understand it as clearly as we can. Was Justice Suryakanth really aware of what he was doing when he stigmatized, when he damned the unemployed youth of India by comparing them to parasites and comparing them to cockroaches and calling them parasites? Parasites. Our own children, parasites. Millions and millions and millions of Indians. 45% of India's youth as of today is unemployed. And for the Chief Justice of India to say that they are all parasites on the system, they're only cockroaches. Was he aware of what he was doing? My answer is absolutely not. He was issuing an unthinking, impulsive statement which not even an adolescent young person should. It went far beyond the remit of his official professional calling. So that's why in the video that I shared with all of you yesterday, I referred to an unknown force that drives history to an unknown purpose that shapes it. I feel that Justice Suryakanth was not doing something personal, but that he was at that point in time gripped by an unseen force that was playing to the tune of an unforeseen purpose guiding it. All these, I know, need great explanations, detailed explanations, but then people don't have patience. What do I do? Now, therefore, at least this let us examine in some detail. To the judge, the Honorable Judge, my lord, the unemployed youth are parasites. Now, what is the meaning of this phenomenon called parasites? who is a parasite. What is parasitism? Let's understand this. When you use words, you have to understand the meaning of what you say. A parasite is one who draws all his sustenance from the host tree or the ecosystem. It puts nothing into the system, it adds nothing to the tree of which it is a parasite, the host tree. It sucks everything out of it, It's a one-way relationship. Certainly no one-way relationship contributes to the dignity of anyone. You don't give employment to the young people, and then you damn them, you criticize them for not contributing. You're not allowing them to use their hands, and then you're criticizing them for not doing any work, not doing any, and making any contributions to the society. Who has made them parasites? Who is responsible for it? So a parasite must be understood. It's a very, very damning word. A parasite is one who draws all his sustenance from the host tree or the ecosystem on which it is a parasite. But the Honorable Judge does not know, or did not know at that time, that this is more applicable to his generation, which is also my generation. Justice Suryakant and I belong to the same generation. I can say this with a little bit of truthfulness in my heart, that my generation was even more parasitical than the present Gen Z. My generation had many advantages. For example, when I completed my postgraduate studies from Delhi University, I did not have to apply for a job. I remember Kirodimal College came and snapped me up. I worked there only for 2 months. Then an opening came in St. Stephen's College, and the principal of St. Stephen's College sent the head of the department of St. Stephen's College to invite me. I didn't approach the college. I was asked to, because in those days, anyone with 50% or above in postgraduate course was assured to get a teaching job. What about now? Even if you have 70%, you have an MPhil, you have a PhD, you still have to stand in a long and interminable queue. When I was the principal of St. Stephen's College, I had to advertise several posts. For every post, 1,000 applications. In other colleges, more than that, because many people knew that it was almost impossible to get into St. Stephen's College, and therefore not many people applied for jobs there. A PhD today works as a lower division clerk or something like that. Who created that system? So my generation was eminently lucky, and Justice Suryakant is riding on the back of that luck. And he does not know that Gen Z does not have that luck. I belonged to a privileged generation. Gen Z knows that they are not in a privileged situation. And on top of that, to be branded as cockroaches is utterly insufferable. It's like being punished for somebody else's offense. And there's not a particle of justice in what Justice Suryakant, the Chief Justice of India, said. Not a particle of justice. It was utterly unwarranted, totally uncalled for. In fact, he owes a public apology. The least he should do is to apologize to the youth of India, the so-called Gen Z. In contrast to my generation, the Gen Zs today are far more creative and enterprising. If Justice Suryakant and I were to fight the situation today, we would have reached nowhere. I can say this about myself. When I compare myself with my grandchildren, I'm astonished. I wouldn't stand a ghost of a chance if I have to compete against them. That's the way things have changed. So the Gen Z today create their own forms of expression, their own styles of protest, their own strategies. They don't follow anybody's path. They are their own pathfinders. And that takes something. And I have profound respect for it. So they are more creative than my generation was. Actually, Justice Suryakant, we were the real parasites. We simply thrived on whatever others created. And in this context, I have to say whatever Jawaharlal Nehru created, with a host of others, but he is the true builder of modern India. No matter what other people say, truth is truth, and no prevarication shall make me utter falsehood. So we need to, therefore, finally, in this video, we need to now examine this epidemic of suicide. After all, CJP will not have come into existence but for the suicide then of 21 people, now of 22 people. One more have committed suicide in Maharashtra. It's now becoming a kind of epidemic of suicide. Are you not worried about it? Are you not concerned about it? Did the 22 young people who ended their lives do so only because they did not get jobs, or they did not get into a medical course or some professional course? Yeah, that is certainly one aspect. There is something more to it, and that's what I plead you take note of. Does their failure in an entrance test necessarily have to result in suicide? People have been failing in examinations for a very long period of time. Entrance tests have been happening even before 2014. And as BJP spokesperson say, there was corruption even then. There's no question. Let's not hide facts. But can you point out a single candidate who committed suicide because he or she failed in the entrance test? Not one. This epidemic of suicide related to eligibility tests started after 2014. It's a historical fact. Nobody can deny that. And in order to understand this in the right perspective, we must take note of the fact that this tendency to suicide has something very powerful to do with the temper of the times and the character of the society to which the young people belong. The society infects individuals with the virus of hopelessness. This is a real COVID, the social COVID of our times. Young people are utterly hopeless. Now, in order to understand this, let me provide a parallel. If you're familiar with the name of Carl Jung, the great psychologist based in Zurich of Switzerland, he wrote about noticing certain patterns of illness that surfaced in the German patients he treated. Please remember the things, certain specific patterns of illness that Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, noticed in the German patients he treated from 1918. The year is significant. The year is significant. He says that he never noticed it before 1918. It never happened before 1918. Like I said, the phenomenon of young people committing suicide because they failed in the entrance test did not happen before 2014. So there is a specific date. And let me quote the words of Carl Jung. He says, there was a disturbance of the collective unconscious in every single one of my German patients. And he says that collective disturbance was characterized by three words. Please remember these three words because they are extremely relevant to our context. He says these three things are primitivity, violence, and cruelty. When a society becomes characterized by primitivity, violence, cruelty, it has a very profound impact on the individuals, pathological impact on the individuals. It makes them psychologically sick. That's the finding of this great, the father of modern, together with Sigmund Freud, of course, the father of modern psychology. He says this state offers no sustenance to individuals. It enervates the individuals, it enfeebles the individuals, and robs them of the staying power. He writes, and I again quote, when I had seen enough of such cases, I turned my attention to the peculiar state of mind then prevailing in Germany. I could only see signs of depression and a great restlessness, something extremely similar to what is prevailing in our midst. I could only see signs of depression and restlessness because we are blind to this reality. Young people, through their suicides, are forcing our eyes open to see this reality, the fact that there is a great depression and restlessness that's afflicting them. Then he says something very, very beautiful. He says, the blonde beast is stirring in an uneasy slumber, and the outburst is inevitable. Blonde beast because it's German. The blonde beast is stirring in an uneasy slumber, and an outburst is inevitable. Beautiful. I don't have to say anything more about it. I will perhaps repeat it once more. A blonde, it's actually worthwhile to learn it by heart as I have. A blonde beast is stirring in an uneasy slumber, and an outburst is inevitable. That says everything. So what I'm trying to say, therefore, is let's not just say that these 22 people and young people went and committed suicide. Let's also recognize the fact that we, each one of us, the society as a whole, has made a significant and culpable contribution to their untimely death. So this raises a fundamental question of immense significance. What is the context? What is the quality of the national context, the ambience of life we are providing to our children and our young people, the Gen Z? The context, the ambience. Is it one of hope? Is it one of nobility, of idealism? Are we providing to them anything inspiring? Anything on which they can pin their hopes? Anything to develop their inner strength, to breast the thrust of life, to stand steadfastly against the storms buffeting them? Do they have anything to overcome the restlessness and the depression we infect them with, when all they have is an admission to a professional course, beyond which everything else is bleak and blank? What do you expect them to do when even that door is shut? Please ask. You and I are parents. A good number of you, like me, are also grandparents. It bleeds my heart to think of it. That's why I'm sharing this heart's agony with you. What do you expect them to do, having put them in this kind of state of utter desperation? We have killed these young people. My generation is guilty of their death. They did not commit suicide, to tell you the truth. We have murdered them. It is not suicide. It is murder. It is murder. It is murder. I have no doubt at all that the NTA officials and everyone else in the Ministry of Human Resource Development who colluded with them, maybe including the minister, the ex-minister, are de facto murderers. The honorable minister was presiding over a massacre. Jai Hind. We will continue our analysis into the next video. Please see that video as well to complete the line of argument.